Good morning. I've been thinking about you, everyone. Certainly all the folks who are lining up behind Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and saying they're populists and they stand for me. Well, they're not really populists. Populist is someone who's really of the people and cares about the people, not someone who's honed an ideology that started with Lewis Powell, went through the Kochs, became the Heritage Foundation in 71, became the Federalist Society in 83, and then now has become Trump's Project 47. That's not populism. No. They don't stand for the people. They got big money behind them. You may think that they have got you in their hearts, but they don't. They are the elite. In Trump's first administration, every one of his cabinet members together totaled a wealth of $35 billion. There's billions of conservative money behind them. And their mantra is power, money, corporate unaccountability, and executive power and judicial power unaccountability. They're not looking for a democracy where everyone is entitled to the slice of the pie. They're just like Elmer Gantry in the film, Clint Eastwood, Robert Duvall, the snake oil salesman selling you a bill of goods. But they don't feel it in their heart. In their heart, they just see they've divided our country. They talk about the Federal Board of Education. Well, you can talk about it, but what's happened to our educational system in this country? And probably every other OECD nation. What's happened is we don't have good teachers anymore. The states control the educational process, and so do the cities and the towns. And our kids are not learning the math, the science, and the English studies that they should be. They don't have the educational skills. We're barely paying teachers enough in many of the southern states for them to teach 5 days a week. No, our kids have suffered, but it's not because of the federal government. It's because of the state government and the city and county governments, and putting restrictions on what children can learn. And when you talk about that, you got to ask, are our kids nourished? Because there's a direct correlation between nourishing our children, giving them breakfast and lunch, and even dinner if they're poor or middle class, and nourishing their brains at the same time. If we did that, we'd have a society of really, really bright kids across the spectrum of all of our minorities and majorities. Because if one thing has been shown to be true, the minorities who are in the military, who follow their families, when they sit down to school, they get great grades in math and English. So it's not a question of who you are and where you are on the economic spectrum. It's a question of, are we getting good teachers? Are our children nourished? Do they have the funds to eat a proper breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And if they do, do they have a place to work and study, because there's nothing better for the mind and the soul than reading books. I know. I came from a middle-class environment. When my dad came back from World War II, I didn't know it until years later. He wanted to be an attorney. But the family said to him, hey, you got a wife, you got a kid, you got to work. So what did my dad do? He went to work. And the only thing he knew how to do was floor scraping. So he scraped floors until he could build his business. And then he was a union shop from, I guess, the early 50s until 1986. We belonged to the Carpenters Union, and we were proud members. My dad could have been very wealthy, I'm sure, but he only took enough, and his guys, and my mother, who was his bookkeeper for many years, they made very, very good salaries. So that's more of being a populist than what the new conservative movement says. They're populists. They care about the people. At one point in time, my dad had 125 men working for him. They couldn't live in the houses that they were putting the floors in because they were FHA houses. And living in those Levitt homes wasn't open to minorities or Jews. The government wanted a certain profile where everyone was the same. We didn't fit into it, neither did our labor. But Levitt homes are still there today, and now anyone can buy one. But not in those days, not in the early 50s. So let's talk about populism. In my working career, after going to school for biochemistry and neuropharm at Cornell Med, I went to work for Ford Motor Company. I became their expert on paint. I not only dealt with the folks on the line who were really, really good to me, because the men at Ford in the early 70s, they were 6'5", and there I was, a little taller, but not much. And they would walk over the railings of the assembly plant, and I remember I wanted to do exactly what they did, but since I was 5 foot tall, stretched, and they were 6'5", they could walk over railings real easy. And because I was good to the guys on the line always and talked to them, one time I remember I went to walk over a railing and I'm looking at it because it comes up to my chest and I don't know how the hell I'm going to get over it. And all of a sudden, somebody lifts up my arms, one man on each side, and they put me over. And it was a really funny experience. But I had many experiences with labor. When Ford Motor Company shut down the Mahwah plant, the U.S. government changed the laws of this land, and they said, no more can you ever shut down a plant with 5,000 people and not give notice to those people and have them placed properly. Those were the days, 1977, 78. Government was proactive. They didn't want to see people on the streets, no matter how unruly the population was. And I can tell you that population in the Mahwah plant, they were unruly. When I came late to a plant meeting, the guys were scared to death that I may not be alive because the week before, they found someone dead in the tires. But I wasn't scared. Nope. I walked those plants I spoke to the people, and we really did clean up the paint shops. So I know what it's like to work. And I got a lot of stories to tell you because I care about people. I care about people who work. And I like to see people make a living and be happy. And I can tell you that when I was at Ford Motor Company, I was well paid. This is 1976 to 79. I know I made over $55,000 a year. And I know the guys on the line made $40 an hour plus overtime because the UAW was really powerful. So let's talk about populism, because I think you're not getting the real story. You're looking at billionaires claiming to be populists. It just isn't so. They're still interested in the money. And if you'll come along and continue the culture wars, they're happy. But that's not what's going to make America great. What makes America great is all of us being productive, being educated, and creating tomorrow so that we're not suffering in this miserable heat and a disaster that is occurring because of our lifestyle and adherence to fossil fuels and plastics. So take care, everyone. There's hope on the horizon. It's all about who you trust. What do you want out of your life? And if you want a better life, think of who's going to give it to you. Is it going to be someone like me? Or is it going to be another billionaire who really loves the money uber alles, and is lawless besides? Not accountable to anyone, not like you and me. We're like Les Miserables, right? Jean Valjean stole a loaf of bread. He was hounded and haunted and hunted for years. But you take over a country and you take all its wealth and you're totally unaccountable. That's not the same. That's not the position you or I are in. Think about it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, another day. But I've got a lot of stories to tell you, and I'm not going to stop. Take care.